Welcome to B-rated, B-rated Conversations. Join us as we talk to the creative people behind the independent movies and get the behind-the-scenes stories. This week, Brian and I talked to Vincent Disanti, the director of Never Hike in the Snow and Never Hike Alone 1 and 2, a trilogy of Friday the 13th fan films. He talks about making a unique trilogy of Friday the 13th films, as well as the upcoming Never Hike Alone 2, which comes out October 13th. Which is a Friday. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. So what was your initial concept for making this series of films, the Never Hike Alone 1 and 2 and Never Hike in the Snow?
This all started really as a 5-minute short film. It was just me and my friends getting together. I had done some really micro short stuff on a succession of Friday the 13th. I believe that there's 1 year in the cycle where there's 3 Friday the 13th. It's like February, March, and then December. And so that year I was like, I'm going to do something special, sort of in a Halloween type fashion. Get dressed up or do some type of short film or do something just to kind of celebrate Friday the 13th, watch some movies and call it a day. Share some photos on Reddit, stuff like that. And then one day I was like, it would be nice to make like a short film. Basic concept was sort of what happens to the people who, don't make it out of Crystal Lake. Like, what are their stories? And I came up with this kind of like short film idea of a guy who's running down a trail. You don't know what he's running from. He sees some safety, but before he can get out of there, he gets attacked by Jason. And then more people are coming and Jason drags him off the trail. And then those people come by. There's one person who sort of sees some evidence. And then before they can go investigate, their friend who they were running with sort of like taps him on the shoulder and says, come on, I'll race you into the trail. And they run off and she doesn't investigate what has happened to this person. And as it pans away, you see the dead hiker get dragged into the woods. And it was Never Hike Alone. But when we originally made this, I had a really shitty costume. We didn't have the proper equipment to shoot it with. Everything was out of focus. It was just a real rough watch. And so I just sort of put that off to the side and kind of came back to the drawing board. And then, a few years later, got the team back together and decided to go off into the forest and give it another shot, this time with a little bit more of 127 hours, the Martian type vibe with mixed media found footage. We were just going to make a trailer and see where that went, sort of based on the same type of idea, but just trying to make something with a little bit more scope and scale. And so we ended up making the trailer that was released, I believe, in May of 2016. We released our first trailer. And it was just a very simple concept. Same thing. Guy goes into the forest, runs into Jason, and gets chased out. Will he survive? In the process of doing that, we were tipped off to an abandoned camp location. So the people that we shot, they let us shoot behind their house to make this trailer. They told us about an abandoned camp that was up the road. We ended up discovering that abandoned camp was when everything sort of took off from there. We had our costume, we had our ability to create cinematic language. We had a good lead actor in Andrew Lady who could carry the film. We had good cinematography and all that stuff. But now we found this abandoned camp that hadn't been touched since 1988 with multiple buildings that had furniture in them, that had stuff that we could at least build off of. And we could just add posters and props and things like that. So me and my team just started taking trips up to the forest every other weekend. We would pack the car with as much equipment and props as possible, build out a room, shoot one of the scenes. And really the film went from this 5-minute idea to a 15-minute idea to a 25-minute idea and eventually turned into an hour-long feature. We worked for over a year on the first movie, just sort of piecemealing it, writing it as we were going type thing. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but we kept coming up with more ideas that we could fit in the middle for him, investigating the camp and more rooms that we could rebuild, different opportunities that came along. And so by the time we released the film in October 2017, we had put together something that was, unique and different as far as Friday the 13th goes, as far as fan film goes. And when we went, online, it sort of just propelled us in a direction that gave, sort of opened up a bunch of opportunities. And, it was not only the opportunity to sort of sit in the Friday the 13th world and get to play with the characters, it was, getting introduced to alumni, being able to extend their stories, and, what type of opportunities would this could have worked my entire career trying to get a Friday the 13th film. And if I had been waiting for a legit one, I still wouldn't even have the opportunity to even work on one because they haven't made one in 13 years. So I just saw it as my opportunity to be like, here's my chance to live my dream. Like, I'm going to make Friday the 13th content, and I get to tell the story that I've always wanted to tell with Friday the 13th. And I have one of my favorite actors in Tom Matthews joining the team. I was able to recruit Vinny Guastafaro and have him reprise his role as Rick Colon, who's now the sheriff, became like the perfect like antagonist to Tommy, other than Jason, and then started coming up with like just these concepts in between. I came up with a version of Never Hike Alone 2 a very long time ago that was based on if I could bring Megan back, and they had a daughter, and there was sort of some back and forth on that, and then found out that Megan, the actress who played Megan, and you have to forgive me because my brain has farted her name out of my head right now. Jennifer something, I believe, but she did Jennifer Cook. She didn't want to come back to do. She doesn't want anything to do with Friday the 13th. So we just started rewriting the story, and I started thinking about things that like fans had asked for but had never happened. One of those things was like being in the snow. And so it was like, okay, we don't have enough money to make this big Never Hike Alone 2 feature, but I could make a short about the snow. That'd be a lot of fun, spilling some blood in the snow, kind of doing that. And, we just sort of pursued the ideas as they made sense. When we went to go make Never Hike in the Snow, that was our model to see if we could make episodes. That way we could turn Never Hike Alone 2, the concept of it, into an episodic, 4 different episodes, $50,000 to $75,000 a piece, keep it short, keep it concise. We can make them in a couple of weeks, and then, post would make another, month or two, and kind of run with that. And we made Never Hike in the Snow, and that was very successful for us, but we ran into the pandemic. So it pretty much halted all sorts of, all forms of production for us. And we've had to wait 2.5 years to get going. But, the popularity that grew out of Never Hike Alone and Never Hike in the Snow grew into a fan base that was, big enough to fund an entire feature film. So now the idea of doing the feature film came back on the table. And since we'd waited 3 years, we were like, let's just go for it. Ended up raising the money for it. We finished shooting it this summer. And slowly but surely, this film went from like 5 friends out in the forest shooting with a GoPro and a DSLR to now, 30 people on set, 5 or 6 actors, professional cameras, professional crew, really doing it sort of the, I guess you quote unquote the right way. But it's, it's something akin to what you would find on bigger level productions or, bigger independent productions, and trying to replicate something for a much low budget that you would recognize on a streaming channel like a Netflix or an Amazon or something like that. So we're definitely trying to push the boundaries on, how far we can go with indie. And so far, we're pretty happy with the results.
Awesome.
It was. I really like we watched it in that order, and I'm not sure if we were supposed to. Like, we watched the Hiking in Snow first, and then the second part of it. And like the one, like, really enjoyed the Hiking in the Snow one because it really just made it, like you said, like you see a different point of view of what's going on with it. Like normally the killer has a reason of why they're doing it and everything like that. But this one, it was just that dude running in the running on the trail, and so then for no reason, but like even the gore on that one, like don't want to spoil what happened, but like that scene was just nuts, man. It was awesome.
Yeah, we wanted to do something different with Snow, where it's sort of an episode of True Detective where you're jumping around in time, and you see, the concept of it was to sort of dial back kills for fans and the way that we view kills, because we open up the film in a very celebratory way with, I don't think we're spoiling it too much, but it's been out since 2020. So, but if anybody watches it, it opens up with a pretty big kill, and it's a lot of fun. And, we get to celebrate it. We get to celebrate the fact that this is what fans wanted. We wanted to see blood spilt in the snow. And then we open up, the story. So we start to learn who this kid was, who this guy was, and trace back through their life and sort of see the events that led up to their demise. And then, what sort of happens afterwards, and how in Camp Crystal Lake has Jason been able to get away with making people disappear and not get caught. And so there's sort of like an interwoven, series of characters that sort of all get in each other's way and
You can hear it.
hurt each other in different ways. And the way that Tommy and the way that Rick kind of relate to each other, and the people they caught in between, like the mother of the person who goes missing, and then the deputy who stays behind to investigate because Tommy has piqued his curiosity. So it's sort of this, not everyone's right, not everyone's wrong type world, but while everyone argues, Jason continues to flourish. And people will continue to die until something else gets figured out or someone admits that, Jason is real. And that's sort of the story that we carry into Never Hike Alone too. It's just that there's this ghost out there haunting the forest, killing people, making them disappear, and nobody can do anything about it. And then all of a sudden this guy stumbles out of the forest and, changes the course of history in Friday the 13th. And so it's kind of a cool, way the series is arcing through. So Snow really kind of, is the last time that Jason did it and got away with it. And then Never Hike Alone is the first time someone's ever gotten away, since, the days of, the Paramount series where we're kind of arcing out from. And for me, they're just like, they're experiments of like, these films are almost like social experiments. Like the first one's like, what if you wandered into a camp and, Jason popped out? Could you survive?
And that's the messed up thing. Like it was, it's just because normally it's like, oh, you did this to my family, or oh, you bought my parents' land because they got, they got evicted off of it. So now I'm going to murder everybody on it. But now, like we've seen some other movies too, where it just shows like how crazy people can actually be. We're just like, why'd you do this? Oh, just because I wanted to. It's like, oh, goddamn, that is a good, and so that's the whole thing of how it portrayed when I was watching it was like, dude, there's no reason like that person should probably just wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, and that's really what it was. I mean, and that's sort of one of the stories of the people that are in Friday the 13th. They're a little bit more innocent than the original Friday the 13th characters are. They're not people who were going in with malicious intent or trying to do drugs or trying to have premarital sex or do anything like that. The first one was just a kid trying to take some photos, and he took the wrong photo, and he had to pay for it. And the second guy was just trying to get some streams for his YouTube channel. Well, he was streaming from the wrong location. Like there's just people who, I always referred to Camp Crystal Lake as sort of a spider web. And if people watch the opening of Never Hike Alone 2, which is our sneak preview that we've released on the YouTube channel, like one of the shots is a spider web. And that was something that was caught B-roll style. But I said, you know what? It makes sense thematically with the way that I've always talked about Camp Crystal Lake, which is it is a spider web. It's this trap. It lures you in. You get drawn to the center of it. And before you know it, you're tangled in the web and the spider's going to come get you. And that's sort of Jason. And Jason in our world really lets people sort of kind of shoot themselves in the foot and get themselves kind of stuck in the camp, and then he can make sure that they disappear and there's no, that's one of the fun things about Never Hiking the Snow is that it shows like, he almost got away. Jason's slipping a little bit. You know what I mean? The people aren't just getting caught in the middle of the camp like they are in the Disappear music video where he's just taking them out like that. It's like, knife through butter. He's starting to get slower. He's starting to lose his step a little bit. And, it's costing him. It almost cost him with, the Mark Hill character, and it definitely cost him with the Kyle MacLeod character. So we get to see sort of Jason in these films also go from this subdued sort of monster regretting his life living in the forest, like, oh, woe is me, I'm stuck here and I got to keep killing people. And then somebody gets out and it's like, oh shit, I screwed up. Like somebody got out. All right, I guess I got to kill everybody. And it's just, you know what I mean? It's back to old Jason ways, and he's going to come back and refine himself as like a monster. And, I think that's part of the fun part is like Never Hike Alone 2 is sort of a resurgence of Jason, whereas because of, budget issues or things like that in the past, we've had to like really tamp down on kills and not make it body count movies that, now it was finally time to make the Friday the 13th that people really wanted to see with like multiple kills, seeing what happens, fight scenes, all that stuff. So bringing all the stuff that's made Never Hike Alone successful so far and putting it into one full package as a full feature film.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. Then you made the comment before I was able to, but if you would have just made this a little bit earlier, then James Franco would probably still have both of his arms if he would have gone hiking by himself.
Exactly.
There's always PSAs in every movie that we watch, and that was if he would have just done it, then
Oh
we would
yeah.
have been all right.
But with this one, I really liked how Jason has had this kind of character fluctuation throughout the Friday the 13th. Like he's big and dumb and strong. He's smart and strong. He's fast and agile. Like, and we never get the same Jason twice. But with this, like he's methodical, and you sort of like circle the square on the like the walking and not running thing, and how he's hunting them, and it's like they're his prey, and it's really cool.
Yeah, it was definitely like, in my head, Jason's been this decaying Terminator for, a couple decades. Like he came back somehow, just like Palpatine, like somehow he came back. And he's this mongoloid creature, but for some reason he can't die now. He's lost the ability to die. So he will take a fatal blow. He will check out for maybe a few minutes, and then he wakes back up and it's back at it again. And he can't really explain what's going on with him. And the more damage he takes over time, it's sort of like a Terminator, like a T800, just taking, bits and pieces are kind of peeling away and showing what's really underneath. And I think that by the time we see Jason in the later films, this, that fresh body is all gone. So there is no more running in him, but he can still stride his way towards people. He still knows his way around the forest. When someone takes the long trail, he knows that he can cut through the section of forest and cut them off somewhere. Or, he's a big, tall, creature too. So he's got long legs. And once anyone who's got long legs can take a long stride. Like you can cover a lot of ground quickly. So that was something I wanted to bring to Jason, and the fact that he, bringing back the stalk, bringing back the fact that when he's like bearing down on somebody, he can pick up some speed, but not break into the run like he could when it was like a part 2 or part 3 or even part 4, where, he's more intact at that point. And it really was about that. It was about finding like a simplicity in the character, bringing some of that like creepiness from Ted White and Richard Brooker and even some of the Steve Dash stuff, but just that early Jason that sort of stalked in the shadows and worked from the corners. And, in close combat, coming up with some of the stuff that's a lot more fun. And I think in Never Hike Alone 2, you're going to see some of that Kane Hodder and CJ Graham come out, because Jason starts to get in the open a little bit. He starts to deal with multiple characters. But at the same time, I think, one of our production assistants said it. He's like, we were kind of going through the movements for it, and he just said, it's so visceral. Like Ghost Jason, when he gets going, is so visceral. So it's like that stalking, sort of creeping leading up to it, which creates tension and anticipation. And then when the execution comes, it's a visceral action that looks violent and feels like, he would do some damage.
Yeah, but then how you were saying, even like when he's stalking up to you and get on top of you, like when he started grabbing the bow, he was like, oh shit, now he doesn't even need to chase you. Like you can be, 50 yards away from him. He's like, oh, I got you. Don't worry about it. Like,
well, that's he's learned.
Yes, there really is no escape from him.
Yeah, Ghost Jason's sort of like an Obi-Wan Jason. Like he's sort of like, he's wise beyond his, like he's been doing this long enough now. He's making smarter choices.
He's also smarter, not harder.
Exactly. Like he knows he's not going to chase this kid down, and this kid's already outran him all this way. But if he can slow him down, then he can take care of him, and and it works. You know what I mean? It's his last. That was Jason's Hail Mary. Is really what that scene is, and he nails it.
It was great. Like you didn't expect that. Like normally you expect like a decapitation or a gutting or something. But so when that one happened, you're just like, damn, like so awesome.
Yeah, something a little bit more, just something, you want to come up with something we haven't seen before. And also the one thing that I like to do to a certain degree is like extend the kill. So like somebody might get hit with an object, but they don't die right away. You kind of watch the light fade out of their eyes type thing. I think that's sort of a more, like, again, visceral and heart-wrenching way to watch somebody get it on screen versus like, they're a rag doll that gets hit with an object and then they're out and knocked out cold. There's something to watching somebody like being sad that they're about to pass away. There's something emotional to that.
Yeah. With these movies, you did kind of like create almost like two different types of horror films, like because like you have like you said it was kind of like a true detective with that first one, and then you did like I feel like it was more of a more effective found footage because you get some found footage but not too much to the point that we're like overwhelmed by it.
I think all found footage should go that route, honestly.
Yeah.
I think when the characters don't need to talk to the camera, or there's nothing that can be told from that point of view, and you got to get to them traveling, you got to get to them just in a location, like just go to it. You know what I mean? Like, I guess I get the appeal of some found footage, but for me, I just wanted something that I didn't want to be bored. You know what I mean? I didn't want to be stuck in for coming up with excuses for the camera to be on, because the camera's not always on. You know what I mean? Like, and then you get to use found footage in an effective way. We got to turn it on for the moments we really wanted to use it, like when, Kyle is searching the camp. Perfect use of it. It's, we put the camera in front of the audience and we make them walk through the doors first. We make them see from his point of view, or we get to see him sort of deliver, a bunch of dialogue because there's no one else but his audience to talk to. And they're not even there yet. But we get to cheat and sort of, do these info dumps in a very, organic way, in a very casual and charming way, because it's coming from our character of Kyle, and Andrew's doing a great job of delivering it. So I think that it was a good combination of that. And then when it came time for action and horror and scope and scale, we get out of found footage and all of a sudden we're in traditional camera world and we're able to shoot the film and really show off the set the way that it needed to be shown off for it to be effective.
Yeah, because like with that second one, it does feel very like intimate and very small and very like it's almost the antithesis of what Friday the 13th film normally is, where it's lots of characters, lots of deaths, like big outrageous people that never exist. And with this one, it's like the noose is tightening on this guy over time, and when you get to the end, it's like this like amazing sense of desperation that he has.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of that film was very fun to put together, as dark and like sad as it is, because it was like this really cool puzzle that unfolded and I would say kicks things out with a bang. It's the perfect send off into Never Hike Alone 2. It sets up sort of everything that we're gonna going on. Gets a bunch of emotional arcs like flying through the air. But yeah, the sort of, I mean, I don't know if you guys have been in like a winter, like are in winter areas, but like during the winter, like you do feel isolated. Like it gets dark out. You're not going out a lot because there's snow, and when you're alone, it could really feel like you're on an island. So like this taking place, there's probably not a lot of people out, out and about in town. It's just the police department. It's this mom. It's Tommy, and it's this kid who's gone missing, and Jason. And, it just sort of shows you, I guess, again, it's like these are the elements that go into place for these, events like this to keep happening. And, just how it goes by like everyday life. Like somehow something as fantastical as this undead creature that's wandered out of the woods and killed this person. Like it comes and goes in this town. Like, somebody went to the forest, went missing in a snowstorm. I mean, how, there's that, but then there's stuff that they sort of like willfully ignore or think is try to ground it in reality that doesn't exist for them. So it was a cool way to sort of, I don't know, it became like a cop drama, a family drama in the midst of this like horrific events that was happening, and you were learning about characters that had real lives and real families that were being ripped out of their lives and leaving massive holes like in this community. That's the power of Jason, that these aren't cannon fodder characters, that these are actual people, these are citizens of Crystal Lake, and they're never coming back.
No, we thought it was awesome.
Cool.
Can't wait for the other one. Like I was talking with Anthony literally last night about it too. Like it seemed like the what do you call it? Hike in the snow and then Don't Hike Alone. Like it ends, the Hike in the Snow ends, and then it literally just says 3 months later, and then it cuts right into Hike Alone. Mm-hmm. Like were those, those purposely set up like that, or what? Because I was like, Anthony, I'm pretty sure that was just one awesome like long film. you know. But I mean, I see where the tie, because the end of it, it says, "Hey, when we come back, we're going to meet Kyle," and then
Yeah.
it's like 3 months later, and then it's like, "What's up, everybody? I'm Kyle. I'm going to go to these woods."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously we made Never Hike Alone first, so there wasn't much. I didn't have a lot of it figured out then. And then when it came time to like start writing stories, I knew what I wanted for Never Hike Alone 2. And then I knew I wanted to do a snowbound film, but those two things weren't necessarily going to go together because Never Hike Alone 2 takes place the same day as Never Hike Alone. So, with, when I came up with the idea for Snow, I was like, what if I did a prequel, about somebody who didn't make it out? I finally go back to the original premise and I actually make a story. And actually, the opening of Never Hike in the Snow is basically the original short for Never Hike Alone that I scrapped. I mean, it's the same type of concept. The person gets close to getting out. Jason catches them at the end and drags them back in the woods. Everything, even down to like getting the axe in the mouth. Sorry, I just. I know. You can bleep me out if you edit it. But it's just sort of like everything down to that too was all there, and I just never got to use it because we ended up, we had a different ending for Never Hike Alone and all that stuff. And so I just started writing in reverse, and I started thinking about how does Jason from the Paramount era connect to my era? And then what are the stories in between that I could say without knocking off the canon that I had established with Never Hike Alone? And a big part of that canon was that Tom has not seen Jason since the events of Jason Lives. And that his big quest, his big arc in life is to find and destroy Jason once and for all. Because he's the one who let the cat out of the bag in the first place back when, the events of Jason Lives happened. So he put him in the lake and thought that was going to work. But it didn't, because Jason got out in part 7. And then Jason disappeared for the part 8, fiasco. And we play it from Tom's perspective. We don't try to go too into the stories or anything, but, you see it in some of the pieces that we're doing that, like, they say house explodes on lake. They didn't say anything about Jason. It's sort of covered up. You know what I mean? Like, what really happened on that cruise ship? Nobody really knows. So, you know what I mean? Like, it sort of just alludes to these events sort of happen, and Tommy's looking at it from that perspective in an only way that he could, because who's he going to talk to? I mean, like, maybe he talked to Rennie, maybe he talked to Tina, but, at the end of the day, like, they don't know where Jason is now. But Tommy's still having visions of him. People are still disappearing. So who else could it be? But here's his Tommy Jarvis, Don Quixote of Christie Lake, riding around on his horse, chasing windmills, calling them dragons and never coming up with anything. And then when he turns his back, somebody else goes missing. He just feels like an idiot because he's supposed to be this town's protector and he hasn't protected anyone, especially, this kid that dies and never hiked in the snow. So, I think that, for me, it was building that storyline for Tommy and setting up those things along the way, telling the story's perspective from outsiders' perspective, people who have moved to Crystal Lake and don't really know the legends and how, if you don't know about a dark past, you can wander into things and not realize it. And then the characters that are actually in Crystal Lake and how have they come along? Rick going from deputy to sheriff. And how has he been handling it all these years? Well, he doesn't believe in Jason, So what happens if he doesn't believe in Jason? Who does he think is doing this? Well, it's got to be Tommy. And so basically coming up with all those story threads, because those are story threads that happen in Never Hike Alone 2, and just writing them backwards so they all fit into one big, long, story arc. This is something that they probably should have done with like the Star Wars series and some of these other trilogies that they keep doing, where they don't think about the next 2 films when they're doing them, when they know that they're going to make 3 of them. Because as soon as I figured out that I was going to do a sequel to Never Hike Alone, I sort of had ideas that would have went in place based on what I did in Never Hike for a sequel. But once we got partnership with Tom Matthews, it sort of made things a lot easier. And I sort of like, once I had the ending, I just started writing backwards, and that's basically how I was able to get like everything, like the Disappear music video, which is very harmless to the timeline because it's just about 3 people that go into the forest and go missing. There's no big investigation there. There's nothing really kind of like fantastical that happens. It's just a typical Friday the 13th film within the span of a 3-minute music video. But, I think that that's sort of what we tell in the Ghost cut, which is, I believe, what you watched, is the the full 83-minute anthology. It's sort of the post Paramount sort of evolution of Jason. Jason returning to his home, doing what he does best, but feeling unfulfilled. Jason, dealing with people still, 13 years later after those events, but now like people are getting close to getting out and someone's going to escape. And then in the last one, finally someone does escape. And all of that leads to when someone finally does escape and Jason has to come out of his cave for the first time in 13, 14, or 20 years or whatever it is. What is Tommy Jarvis going to do about it? And can he do it on his own? And, how is everyone going to react when this sort of happens? And it's just sort of like as events unfold and people reacting to what's happening to them, and it all leads to one, inevitable conclusion.
Nice. And like Tom Matthews, like it seems like he really loves this character of Tommy Jarvis, because like I was checking through his IMDb and he's portrayed this character a few times in different Friday the 13th films.
Yeah, no,
like outside of the normal canon.
Yeah, no, he's Tom really loves. There's two things that Tom loves. One is being Tommy and doing stuff for the fans. He's done stuff for the video games. He's done stuff with other films. And with Never Hike Alone, he's really kind of taken this one as sort of like his sort of home base in a way, because we're really we're going and making the stories like fully about him. We've been building towards his timeline and all of those things. We've been working on that. But in the meantime, like he still has a relationship with Tom McLaughlin and C.J. Graham, who he worked with on Friday the 13th Part 6. And so I know he went out so he could do a project with them because they're good friends of his. Obviously, he did, anyone who has the Friday the 13th game know that Tommy Jarvis, that's Tom Matthews coming back in. That's his voice. He was able to do it for that. I believe Tom's probably done some voiceover for some other people as well. I mean, he's reprised the role now 3 or 4 times for us. So, yeah, I mean, this is a character that I think that, Tom really takes to and loves playing. And, with Never Hike Alone 2, we really wrote something for him that like I could tell that he loved coming to work every day and being able to sort of become a character. I could say the same. He would probably say the same thing about Freddy too. Like, probably one of his favorite characters being in Return of the Living Dead. And, getting to play that role and, really kind of delve deep into that. Tom's like love for acting has really kind of come full circle in the last few years since doing Never Hike Alone and doing a few independent films like Killer Therapy. He was also in another film called Final Summer. I mean, he's been working more in the last, I'd say 6 years than he did previously in the previous 10 to 15. And, and that's by his choice. He was able to leave the acting world for a while. He has career interests in other ventures, but it's fun to see Tom be passionate about acting again and going after the opportunities that come his way so he can spend more time on screen and on set, because he's still got a lot left in him.
Yeah, that's awesome, because it just seems like it really does seem like he enjoys this character and he invests in this character, and I that was one of the things that really showed through. So with Never Hike Alone 2, you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but as far as like the experience of it and like what the story is and like all that, what can we expect out of this the sequel coming out this Friday the 13th, October 13th?
Yeah, I mean, everything that we've been building up to in Never Hike Alone 1 and Never Hike Alone and Never Hike in the Snow really kind of comes to a head here. This is 3 months after the disappearance of Mark Hill. Life has gone on in Crystal Lake. Tommy still can't find Jason. Diana still can't find her son. Rick still can't find the answers to who's killing all these people. And Crystal Lake doesn't seem... it's a peaceful place, but no one seems to be at ease. And then... one day, a kid in a red jacket stumbles out of the forest and starts a shitstorm of violence and mayhem where when Tom goes to rescue this lost hiker, that he's attacked by Jason Voorhees and all the alarm bells are raised. And, Tom is the boy who cried wolf coming to town, telling everyone that Jason is coming. and how everyone's going to react to that, and what are they going to do when Jason shows up on their doorstep. And so it's a cool kind of jumping off point from the previous films. We get to see what happens after Jason chases after that ambulance. We get to see how Tommy found Jason, and then we get to see everything that happens afterwards, which is the best part. Now we get to see sort of, okay, if Tom has been out here all this time looking for Jason with a plan to kill him, what is his plan, and is it going to work? And can they even if they have a plan, will they be able to execute it? And so, in classic fashion, like the heroes have a lot to overcome in the film. People have to work together, or else they're not going to survive. And everyone who gets caught in between is going to get murdered by Jason in brutal fashion. And so we get to have multiple scenes with people being killed, innocent people being killed, people who have no business being anywhere near this violence, getting pulled into it for no reason. But we still take that care and sort of, finesse that we do with our previous films and try to make everything as, presented to it as high as quality as possible. There's, the scope and the scale, it's bigger than ever. We shot in more locations for this one. We shot at an actual hospital. We shot on sound stages. We shot at an actual camp in the forest. We shot at the original abandoned camp. We shot at a private lake in Carson, Washington. We have some of the best locations I've ever seen in an independent film in one in this $250,000 feature film. We really push the limits of everything that we do with Womp Stomp. We've pushed the limits before with some of the stuff we've done, and we just keep doing it again. There are double-digit kills. There are probably I think there's like 4 fight scenes between Tommy and Jason.
Oh wow!
The whole film. I've jokingly called so if Never Hike Alone 1 was The Martian or that sort of structure, and then Never Hike in the Snow was like a True Detective or a Justified episode or something like that. Honestly, Never Hike Alone 2 is sort of a kaiju film. It's about 2 monsters that battle at the end of every act, and then the sort of lead up to each of those battles, and then everything that happens in between those two, as you're tracking the 2 monsters working towards each other in each sort of thing. And in like a group kaiju film, there are other monsters that show up for the good guy that kind of help, that need to take on the one bad guy. So it was funny when I started writing it and realizing that was the structure that I was naturally going into, because I'm a big Godzilla fan. I've watched a lot of kaiju films. And even though this is a horror movie, there are horror scenes, there are, it's that typical thing. I just felt that structurally it sort of plays out like a Godzilla versus Kong, like, all right, we're telling the story of 2 different characters that are just going to keep running into each other, and like someone or something has got to give until only one of them or none of them are left standing. So it is definitely want to give fans a bang for their buck. I want it to be emotionally jarring. You don't know who's going to win, who's going to lose. We really take everyone down to the nub, I think, and at the end of it, I just hope that fans sort of get the closure from a Friday the 13th film that they haven't gotten in a long time. Something that makes them feel like, all right, if they were going to put this series to bed and they were going to call it like a 13th film, that, if you put everything in Never Hike Alone together over the course that we've done in the last 6 years, that you could say like, yeah, this is the saga. This is what we waited for. Like, this is the type of story that we wish would have been put together a lot earlier, but we finally got it. It still fits in with all the other crazy shit, but hell yeah, like, wow, a bookend on this. Now we can create new material without ever wondering, like, what if they would have just finished that? Like, why didn't they ever get that to an ending? Why did they leave it dangling like that? Or really, are we going to call Jason Goes to Hell the way that, like, it was supposed to go down? Like, isn't that, like, really? Come on. Like, and I think from that perspective, I represent those types of fans who have always been wanting something more out of the franchise, not quite getting it. And now we're sort of, but not just us. I mean, like, you think about, there's a lot of fan films out there doing this, my good friends who made the Jason Rising project saying, everything after like final chapter, we're just saying sayonara to, and we're telling a new story after that, and sticking with that type of Jason. And it's sort of like, with Friday the 13th, I always jokingly call it's a pizza with 12 different slices. Fans sort of gravitate towards one slice or the other. And if you're a fan of part 4, well, you have different taste than a fan of part 6, or a different taste of a fan of part 7 or part 8 or part 2 or part 5, or Jason Goes to Hell or Freddy versus Jason. Our views on Friday the 13th are so skewed. And that's why it's so cool to see everyone's interesting take. And it's just sort of, I think it was kind of cool to be one of the first fan films out of the gate to get that recognition, that set together a tone and a storyline that fans could really kind of gravitate towards and feel like, oh my God, this feels like it's operating within the boundaries of the films that I used to watch back in the day. They're not violating any rules. This feels like a natural progression of it. And that was always my goal, to make something that feels like it could tack on and not feel like, oh, well, why does Jason look that funky, or this, or like that doesn't look like the shape of Jason, or all these continuity issues. It was sort of very complicated to figure out how to make it sort of fit. But the way to do that was to simplify.
Oh, it turned out pretty solid.
Thank you.
Yeah. You ready for the hard-hitting questions, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think you hit one of them already.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Which I did see some things about that that new what is it? The new Freddy film. Here and there. Which that looks pretty cool.
Thank you. Yeah. Every now and then I will produce on a film. I've produced a few fan films, produced a few independent films, and Cecil Laird, who's the director of the Dylan's New Nightmare film, came to me with that project right before the pandemic, and we jumped on it and threw it together and stuck to it, and we're lucky enough to say that it's coming out this year, probably in a few weeks, and we're excited for it to release it. I think we did a pretty good job on that. It's pretty rad.
That's awesome. Are there any other like upcoming projects that you have, or like in the talking phases or whatever?
Yeah. Well, obviously, with Never Hike Alone 2, that's sort of our main focus right now. We were getting an animated project together called Ghost in the Fog, which is supposed to be another something along the lines of I would say a Disappear, in terms of story, telling story. It's just about 3 people that go missing in the forest and their untimely demise, meeting Jason, in the setting of like a really foggy night on Crystal Lake, which is pretty cool. And to do that in animation, we partnered with Mako Animation on that. And we have to sort of figure out how to raise the funding for it. We may launch a Kickstarter for that. And then after that, there's a bunch of, I can't really talk too much about things. There's a couple things that I'm attached to. There's a couple of projects that I want to write. There's another project that I have called Ghost Chicken that I want to raise some money for, which is actually another animated film about a vegan restaurant that's haunted by the ghost of the chicken and the one girl who wants to know why. I used to work in feature animation and stuff like that, so I've really been kind of itching to get back into that world. So there's some stuff in that realm. There's different scripts that I have kind of going around and kicking around. I got pitch decks to build. But yeah, once Never Hike Alone 2 is done, I'm jumping in, to some really fun original stuff, and hopefully we'll have that on the, have big announcements about that some probably early next year, once we get the Never Hike Alone 2 Blu-rays flowing out of here and doing all that stuff. I think by then we'll have some more answers. If not, probably by next summer, really, to be realistic.
Oh, wow. Oh, and then let's see. Are there any, we have a list of movies that we need to hit and watch. So would you have any suggestions for us that you would suggest us watching?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, have you ever seen Upgrade? Lee Winnell's Upgrade?
No.
I always recommend Upgrade. That's sort of like in a more sci-fi sort of count. It's not too horror, but it's pretpretty rad.
I think it had that awesome fight scene, right, in the apartment.
Yeah.
That's
a good one. Let me see, what else have I seen lately that's just been really, really good. Last thing I saw was Oppenheimer. I had a pretty good time with that. Prior to that, let's see, I don't know. They're few and far between now. Like when they're just like, they really kind of like move me. And I'm trying to think of the last film that I was like, wow, yeah, like that was amazing. I don't know. It's been a while.
It's all good.
Yeah.
And well, how can people get a hold of you? Like, what's the best way
Or to follow
People can
you.
find us on
to follow
social
you?
media at Womp Stomp Films, WOMPSTOMPFILMS. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter X, we're on TikTok, but most importantly, we're on YouTube. That's where all of our major content goes. That's where all of our films are. We have a bunch of short films you probably never heard of before. They'll be nice and fun to watch. We have a short film called Imagine, which is really rad. My first film, The Red Room. We have another film directed by my friend Austin called Pathosis. We'll have a new Giallo film playing on the channel next year called Bath Bomb, a short film, and lots of other sort of behind the scenes Never Hike Alone content, behind the scenes footage, gag reels, interviews, scenes that got cut out of the movie, work in progress scenes that we never released or never showed anybody. Lots of really cool stuff. So definitely dig around the channel. We have an Indiegogo going on right now for Never Hike Alone 2. We are still raising funds to help pay for the post-production. So we're running a raffle right now, which if you purchase something called a Jarvis versus Jason perk, so it's like a red style perk that you'll see on the campaign, it enters you into a raffle to become one of the executive producers on the film, and you'll win one of 2 screen used Tommy Jarvis prop shotguns from Never Hike Alone 2.
Wow.
So if you haven't backed the campaign yet, I would definitely suggest getting one of the Jarvis versus Jason perks and maybe bundling off of that. If anyone ever wants to email us, it's wompstompfilms@gmail.com. Very simple. All the emails go right to me, so you'll probably get a reply from me, and I can help you with whatever you need. And then other than that, we're doing a screening on August 13th at Battleground Z in Lincoln, Rhode Island for the Ghost Cut, and I'll be there for a live Q&A for anyone who's got any questions about the films or just crowdfunding or anything in general. I'll be there to answer questions, and I'll also have some Blu-rays on display and other things that people can purchase at the show.
Awesome. Any plans on coming out to Vegas?
Probably. I mean, I'll probably end up in Vegas at some point. There's some cons that happen in Vegas. There's some good film festivals. Sin City Film Festival or some Sin City Horror Fest, I think it's called, is a fun one to go to. We've had Never Hike in there a couple of times. So yeah, I'll definitely be in Vegas sometime.
All right. Yeah, for sure. We'll have to try to meet up in Vegas. I don't know the next time I'm going to go, Ohio. But
all right.
No, it was awesome.
We'll try to get Never Hike Alone 2 will be coming out October 13th this year, Friday the 13th in October. And then we're going to start it's going to go live on YouTube, so everyone will be able to watch it for free in 4K, which is pretty rad. And then I'm going to be on tour with it. We're going to be at film festivals all over the country, maybe all over the world. Wow. We get to a lot of territories with it too. So definitely keep an eye. If you follow us on social media, you'll hear about all these screenings. You'll be able to get there and see the film in person. I do suggest catching it on a big screen. It's just a different experience. We all like watching things on our phones and on our computers and on our iPads, but I guarantee you, when you haven't seen Never Hike Alone until you've seen it on a theatrical screen, because that's what's kind of cool about the films, is that when they get put on a big screen, they fit a big screen. You don't feel like they're being overtaken by it. They don't feel like they don't belong up there. They really sort of like transport you to another world. So definitely come out and see a screening and say hello.
That's awesome.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you for talking to us. We appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and let me spread the word about Never Hike.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. This podcast is available on all major podcast networks and YouTube. If you like what you're hearing, please follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.